about having a cool urban style cocktail party? Me either. I mean, it sounds like you'd have to be a supermodel to attend. No, I'm just more of a come as you are, backyard fiesta type of guy. But you know what I've learned? That if you combine that sort of super cool cocktail party chic with a little of the open-hearted warmth and alegría of Mexico, well, you get the perfect mix. You know, the cocktails become margaritas with all their citrusy refreshment. The food becomes antojitos, those fabulous little packets, small bites that are stuffed with all kinds of surprises and bold flavors. And the music? Why, it could melt the heart of the iciest supermodel. Now, the first thing that I do when I'm gonna have some folks over is to pick out a few tracks to kind of get me in the mood. Now, if Latin food is an incredibly varied universe that goes way beyond burritos and gooey cheese enchiladas, well, Latin music is pretty much just the same. I mean, it's so much more than that bubblegum music that you can hear on your Spanish language top 40 station. It can be surprising and complex, and so I'm still on my little crusade to tell the world about people like Lila Downs, who sings in Spanish and in Mije, an indigenous Mexican language, incredible voice. Or folks like Armando Garzón, who was born in Cuba, but then he moved to Mexico and records beautiful stuff. Or like the old swing and sway favorites of Daniel Santos. Now, I used a word a minute ago, antojitos, and most people think that that word is Spanish for hors d'oeuvres or snacks. Well, that's at least partly true, but it's just so much more than that. In Spanish, the word really means little whims or cravings. And it's a whole class of dishes that hold a very special place in the hearts and the stomachs of Mexico. People love to buy antojitos from street vendors or marketplace cooks. Well, they might take the form of everything from soft, warm tortillas folded and filled to make tacos al carbón with charcoal grilled skirt steak and green chili rajas, or tacos a la plancha with griddled potatoes and spicy, tangy chorizo sausage. They might be crusty masa boats that they call sopes, topped with a little bit of roasted tomato salsa, some cilantro, a little grated cheese, or fluffy tamales, steamed in corn husks and filled with either savory things or sweet things, or jalapeños rellenos, filled with shredded pork or chicken picadillo. Now, here in Veracruz, they typically serve them as a little soft taco with a couple of steaming hot corn tortillas and a splash of spicy salsa. In this port town, these are one of my very favorite things. Wow. Now, what's the common denominator between all the different kinds of antojitos? Well, I think you could say that antojitos are sort of like the top 40 of the Mexican food charts. Sort of uncomplicated, lively, fun, all about instant gratification. And you can really say that these little two-bite wonders are all designed to be picked up and eaten with your hands, which of course brings us back to our cocktail party. Because antojitos, in my opinion, are the all-time perfect party food. And we're gonna start our all antojitos all the time menu with our little version of this. But you know, when I'm having a cool little cocktail party, I don't want to spend all day over the fryer. So we're gonna think about that batter. We're gonna think about nixing it. Well, and we're gonna nix starting with fresh jalapenos too. I'm gonna start my jalapenos rellenos with these jarred, pickled jalapenos. Dump them out into the bowl with the rest of them. We got a lot of people coming to our party. Well, so to get in the party mood, I think I'm gonna put on a little Daniel Santos from the 50s. Now to fill those pickled jalapenos, let's make a pretty straightforward chicken picadillo. It starts with a hot pan filled with a little bit of olive oil, chopped onion and tomato. Let that get started cooking there while I add some raisins, a little bit of garlic, and some manzanilla olives, those green olives. They come with the pits in them. Of course, you gotta cut the pits out. Stir that around and let it cook together until it all reduces into sort of a homogeneous mixture. Then, of course, you gotta prepare the pickled jalapenos now for stuffing. So let me show you how you do that. Take one, lay it out in front of you. And now we're gonna cut a T, essentially. Starting on one side, small knife, pointed knife works the easiest here. Cut through it like that, across the top. Cut straight down like that, but don't go all the way down to the bottom of it. Then open it up, and with a small spoon, like a little teaspoon or espresso spoon, or even take the 1/4 teaspoon measure from your measuring spoon set and go in there with that. Scrape out the veins and the seeds, leaving yourself a nice little pocket. One down now, 18 to go. Next step is to simmer some chicken, salted water, maybe a piece of onion in there, till it's completely tender, and then start pulling off the skin and the bone and shred the meat into small little pieces. All of it goes right into the skillet with the cooked down vegetable mixture. Stir that, let it cook a little bit longer until everything comes together in again, a homogeneous mass. Let it cool off and you're ready to stuff the jalapenos. We want to fill each one of the little prepared jalapenos to overfull with the little picadillo mixture. Remember that the jalapeno is pretty spicy and the filling is not. Kind of reform them like that. You can imagine these are going to be pretty bold in flavor, so I want to pair it with something that's more comforting. I've got in mind a little empanada, a little turnover filled with Mexican fresh cheese. Now, typically, an empanada will be made with a wheat flour crust, tender and delicate, but I've got something that's more unusual in mind, something that people in Mexico are just going bananas over. Bananas? Well, yes and no. Those are actually plantains, and they're second cousins to those sweet yellow bananas that we like to slice up and put on our cornflakes in the morning. Now, in Mexico, the yellow banana is called a plátano, but so are the plantains, though they usually go by a more evocative name of plátano macho. But I don't really want to go there. Now, plantains are really in the fruit family, but at most places in the world they actually use them as a vegetable. So if you're new to cooking with plantains, maybe you should start thinking about them sort of more like this, a potato. Now, when you're using a plantain as a vegetable, you use a green one. And just like with the potato, the first step is usually to peel it. Once it's peeled, you've got a hard, starchy flesh, and if you tried to eat it, it would be very unpalatable, just like a raw potato. Once it's cooked, though, that flesh is still starchy, but it softens, and it has a flavor and a texture someplace between potato and a sweet potato. But as these things ripen, they start to soften and yellow, and the starch goes way down and the sugar comes way up. These are what we call yellow ripe plantains. They're still sweet, but not terribly sweet, and they make a perfect dough for making little turnovers. But in Mexico, most people just love the black ripe plantain. You know what I like to do with these is to slice them up and fry them in butter and drizzle them with cajeta, that goat milk caramel, for one of the most classic Mexican desserts. A little tropical music from the plantain belt. Now, when you're making plantain empanadas, you want to choose ones that are ripe like this. Now, the first thing that you do when you're preparing the plantains is to cut the ends of them off, cut it in half, and give a slit down each one of them. Put them on a baking sheet and bake them at 350 degrees for about 40 minutes until they're completely tender, and then let them cool off. Now when the plantains have completely cooled off, peel them out of their skins, add to it about a cup of all-purpose flour, then about 3/4 of a teaspoon of salt, and pulse it until it comes together as a dough. Now the dough has come together, so we're ready to form those little empanadas. Now it's really a sticky dough, so you want to do that forming with a spoon, scooping out first about a 2-ounce ball. That would be about the size of a golf ball. And then put it directly into flour. And you got to heavily flour it, very heavily flour it. And I'm going to do the first pressing out on a tortilla press lined with plastic. Very gently press it out. We're going for about a 4 or 5-inch disc. Pull the top piece off there. And we've got a little of that fresh Mexican cheese. This is the queso fresco that's sprinkled over lots of little tacos. And then close it up all the way around like that. You want to work quickly because you've got to make sure that you can unmold it. It's getting a little sticky on one side there. Undo it there and just slide it right into the hot oil. Now, if you want to make these ahead rather than just going straight from the forming and into the oil, you need to put them onto a baking sheet that's lined with a kitchen towel that you've very heavily floured so that they'll come right off. Cover them up and put them in the refrigerator. 350 degrees is the perfect temperature to fry our little empanadas at, and it only really takes about 2 minutes for them to get browned. Now, if you want to make these ahead, you can do it. You could fry them early in the day, and then when the guests arrive, pop them into a hot oven and let them rewarm. And then just sprinkle them with some coarse salt and set them out with a bowl of salsa. All you need is just a classy little platter. Oh yeah, this will be just perfect. This is really one of the things I love about Mexico. Well, I don't mean just the shopping, though I do love that too. No, I'm talking about this whole concept of beauty and spirit and flavor and context. You know, around here there's an unself-conscious kind of artfulness. And you know what I like to do? I like to look around for something that's sort of surprising when I'm here. Something like this old raw sugar mold filled with candles, and then take it home and plop it right down into the context of my life, where its beauty and even its hipness can take on a whole new meaning. Okay, so we've got those little jalapeños rellenos, and we've got the little plantain empanadas and a beautiful platter to serve them on. But I want one more little nibble. And I'm thinking about what's probably Mexico's greatest contribution to the North American party circuit. The little tostadita, what you might call the tortilla chip. Now, they're great with salsa and great with guacamole, but I like to think of them as something like a cracker or a crostini. The perfect little base to pile something on. Now in Mexico, that might be ceviche, that lime marinated fish, but I'm thinking about a smoky pork tinga. And to make it, we're gonna accompany it with a little bit of soulful Lila Downs from Oaxaca. Now to make this smoky pork tinga, we first have to cook some pork. Just simple stewing pork from the grocery store would be okay, or maybe you want to get a piece of pork shoulder and cut it into 1-inch cubes. Put it into some simmering water with a spoonful of salt, and then I'm going to cut a couple of garlic cloves in half and throw those into the pot as well, just to give it some good flavor. Partially cover it and let it cook for about an hour or so till the meat is just fall apart tender. At that point, just cool it off and shred it. Okay, once the pork has completely cooled off, then tear it into little shreds, and then you need to brown it. I've got a hot pan I'm going to add a little bit of oil to, and then the pork goes directly in there, and also in the same pan, I'm gonna scoop up some chopped white onion to brown right alongside it. Take about, 10 minutes or so, stirring it every once in a while till it's richly browned. Now, when the meat looks like this, then you're ready to make all of the flavorings. And that's gonna start with a couple of cloves of garlic. I'm just gonna take the peel off of a clove of garlic by mashing it with the side of the knife. Then put a couple of cloves into the food processor and pulse it till they're roughly chopped. And then to that, I'm going to add a drained can of tomatoes. A little bit of Mexican oregano. These are classic flavors for tinga, but the most classic flavor comes from the chipotle chilies. Now that's the smoke-dried jalapeno, but it's been reconstituted in a little vinegary tomato sauce. And I'm gonna put a couple of these in there. Suit your own taste. If you don't want it to be very spicy, then only use one. I'm gonna also put in a little bit of that canning liquid there. From that, we're gonna make a kind of coarse puree and put that right into our browned meat. So that goes in, we'll stir it for about 5 minutes or so until it's noticeably thicker. A little seasoning of salt and stir that in, and then I'm gonna give it a little taste here. Pretty good. We'll make our little tostadas once the cocktail party gets underway, which of course brings us to the sine qua non of the cocktail party, the cocktail. I'm gonna round up the usual suspects of the beer and red and white wine and a little mineral water, but if we're gonna have a really cool Mexican coctelada, we've gotta have the coolest Mexican cocktail of them all, the margarita, which a few people tell me is their favorite part of the Mexican meal. You know, we Americans down over 600 million of them every year. And now I'll admit that I like a well-made margarita every once in a while, but I gotta let you in on a little secret. They're not really all that Mexican. Now, tequila, sure. I mean, for hundreds of years, that stuff's been, well, it's been a major part of the macho world of the cantina, but hardly mixed up with anything more than just a little lick of salt and a squeeze of lime. But the margarita, its classic proportions combine tequila with Cointreau, that orange liqueur, and some fresh squeezed lime juice, and then shake it all up and serve it in a salted glass. So where in the world did that all come from? Well, you see, back in the 40s in Acapulco, when that place was the real playground for the rich and famous, there was this bigger-than-life Texan, and her name was, well, you guessed it, Margarita Sames. And one day she stormed into this cantina and she demanded to have a tequila mixed up with some Cointreau and lime and served in a salted glass, and that's the way the whole thing got started. Well, maybe. I mean, it could have been Daniel Negrete in Puebla, whose girlfriend liked to lick salt while she drank, and that, of course, led to the salted glass. Or maybe it was Pancho Morales in Ciudad Juarez at Tommy's, or maybe it was named after a famous movie star whose real name was Margarita, but her stage name is what most of her fans knew her by, Rita Hayworth. Well, I don't think we're ever gonna separate the tall tales from the cocktails, but there is one thing for sure, and that's that the margarita is a blonde bombshell that's pretty easy to fall in love with. Now here at our restaurant, well, we make all different kinds of margaritas, but my favorite is the most classic one of all, and it starts by dipping a cocktail glass into a little lime juice and then straight into some coarse salt, and then into a cocktail shaker. I'm gonna put some ice cubes and start filling it up. Equal portions of silver tequila and Cointreau and then that fresh squeezed lime juice. Now all that goes into the cocktail shaker and gets shaken vigorous, but you really want to shake it up good. I'll let that ice start to melt and the drinks to get really frothy, and then strain it right into your prepared glass. Wow, that's the classic. Oh, I almost forgot. We need some of these nuts for our party. Now there's 3 little garnishes for these tinga tostadas. The first is fresh avocado diced. Then the second is the fresh Mexican cheese I'm just sprinkling over there, and a little bit of cilantro over the top of all of that. Now, I've put together a little bit of, well, shall we call it satisfaction assurance for my party. I'm gonna put out some of this addictive, spicy nut mix that we put on the tables in Frontera, with a little salsa, some guacamole, some chips, of course, all that out with our wonderful stuffed jalapeños and the little plantain empanadas. Ooh, I think it's time to get this stuff out. Okay, it's cocktail time. All we need now are the guests.
Yo no sé nada, yo llegué ahora mismo. Si algo pasó, yo no estaba ahí. Que si lo dijeron, que si alguien lo vio, que si lo cogieron, que si qué sé yo no sé nada. Yo llegué ahora mismo.
You know, in Mexico, people never seem to need an excuse for mixing it up with family and friends. Practically any occasion can become a celebration. So whether you're having a cool little coctelada or just a spur-of-the-moment get-together, all you really need is just a little something to eat and drink, some cool mood music, and a room filled with the 2 most important ingredients of all, amigos and alegría.
Hey, Rick, great party.
Thanks.
Who's the caterer?
Salud.